Welcome, everybody. Today's guest on Modern Pipeliner podcast is Jeff Krimmel of Pinnacle, and he is doing a lot for sharing up-to-date, data-driven policies and current news and everything about energy industry. So I thought he would be a great guest for the show. Welcome, Jeff.
Thank you so much, Tim.
Yeah, so glad to have you and be able to share some time with you and get to know you a little bit better and share you with the audience and hopefully get you some new audience over there for your show.
Well, I'd appreciate that.
Yes, sir. Now, in the show, we usually kind of dip into you and who you are, what's your story, your resume, and how did you get to here?
Great. So my background is pretty unique in the sense that I have, in terms of education, I have a bachelor's, a master's, a PhD, all in mechanical engineering. I got my bachelor's degree from the University of Texas at Austin, and then I went out to California to Caltech, and that's where I got my master's and my PhD. And my graduate school research was all in an area called computational fluid dynamics, and it was specifically steered at a biomedical research application. So I went through graduate school thinking, okay, I'm going to build this career for myself in or around the biomedical space that's going to be, pretty deeply embedded in the research and development pathways. Well, I defended my PhD thesis in March of 2010. And if you go back and look at national unemployment over time, coming out of the financial crisis, it is peaking in the fall of 2009, which was right when I was applying for jobs.
Yeah.
So long story short, applied for a bunch of jobs. I got two offers. One was from a defense contractor out in San Diego. The other was for Baker Hughes in Houston. Yeah. And I was born and raised in Houston. Family's there, friends there, all the rest. So I figured, okay, I don't know exactly what the future holds for me. I had not considered at all for an instant getting into oil and gas. But I was like, going to Baker Hughes, at least it's interesting work. The people do seem pretty interesting. And I'm back in Houston. So if it goes haywire on me, I'm back home and I can use my network to hopefully try to find whatever the next step would be.
Yeah.
Well, I joined Baker Hughes in the summer of 2010, and about 15 months into my tenure, I get launched into this leadership development program. And long story short, this leadership development program takes me into some data-driven pricing and profitability work, and then that led into some strategic market intelligence work. And so I was doing that all through an upstream oilfield services lens, looking at Baker Hughes's competitors, so the Schlumbergers and Halliburtons and Weatherfords of the world, also looking at all the big customers that Baker Hughes has. Well, Baker Hughes combined with GE Oil and Gas, and about a year after that combination is when I left Baker Hughes. Yeah. And I went to another upstream oilfield service company called Key Energy Services that's more in the workover space. Yeah. An old mentor of mine in Baker Hughes was the VP of Sales and Marketing over at Key. So he had a spot for me over there. So I went there, worked there for about a year and a half until COVID landed. Me and I think nominally, say 30% of the Houston team got laid off in April of 2020. Yeah. Fortunately, I've landed where I am now at Pinnacle at the end of June of 2020. And I've been at Pinnacle ever since. So Pinnacle is not upstream oilfield services. My first two stops were in that space. What Pinnacle does, we call it industrial reliability services. Pinnacle largely works with petroleum refiners, petrochemical operators, miners, water wastewater treatment plant operators to help them use data to design optimized inspection and maintenance and reliability programs. And so I've been doing that in different capacities at Pinnacle for almost exactly 3 years now.
Very good. Very good. Yeah, it seems like we're almost touching there in a few of those places. I actually worked in the field after college, and it was hard to get a job back there. 07, 08, 09. Well, I wound up getting hired in at Greens because I worked in the field for them, Greens Energy Group. And I'd also worked for Weatherford in the field as a contract laborer. And then, worked my way up, estimating, project management, and sales. And, and I've done a few little jobs, renting traps and stuff like that with Baker Hughes, and support some smart tool runs and chemical cleaning. Used y'all for some chemical in the past. And so we kind of close by there. And
that's right.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to say, it's funny you say that. It's something I learned very early in my career. Maybe we can get to it along the way here, but just how small
Yeah.
the world is, particularly in oil and gas.
Fraternity.
Massive industry, tons of people, and yet almost every day you'll run into someone with whom you have some kind of connection.
Yeah, yeah. And I'd use key energy for water hauling in the past, for projects for hydro testing. So yeah, so I guess we're kind of, kind of in the same places at the same time. Now, when did you become passionate about your focus in what you're doing now?
That's an interesting question because, and I alluded to it earlier with the graduate school story, that energy was not on my mind
Yeah,
at all. I really thought I was going to do biomedical, some sort of biomedical application, not just because I had done that, my research as a graduate student, but when I entered my undergraduate program in the fall of 1999. Back then, it was a big push within engineering. Anything that touched biomedical was viewed as being the next hot area. And
yeah,
so while I didn't want to major in biomedical engineering, I really did want to major in mechanical engineering because I felt like it gave me more optionality.
yeah,
Wherever I could, right, I would try to steer. I remember doing a course project as an undergrad where I studied the fluid dynamics in a functioning lung and that kind of stuff. So I tried to steer toward biomedical. Of course, did that as my graduate school research. So energy was not on my mind until I was just doing a blanket job search coming out of graduate school. Found the role at Baker Hughes, interviewed for it, got the role, moved to Houston, started up. It is one of these lessons, and I'd learned it before I actually heard about the lesson after the fact. And now that I've lived it, I do believe pretty deeply in it, which is this idea that there's one school of thought, right, where you just think deeply, meditate, reflect, and identify your passions. And then once you have your passions in hand, you orient yourself and steer toward those, with your best efforts. Another way of thinking about it is whatever skill sets you have, if you find valuable, productive ways in which to deploy those skill sets, you will develop a passion around that. If you're
yeah,
good, if you're given a chance to grow and explore and satisfy your curiosity, I
yeah,
believe you can manufacture passion if you're in the right environment, if you're surrounded by the right people,
yeah,
if you're motivated, if you give yourself, the inspiration and capacity and lack of excuses to go pursue all that. You can find your passion in that way. So I actually developed my passion working in energy as I was at Baker Hughes, specifically as I was connecting in with some of the most high profile people they have there, right? Tens of thousands of people
right.
working all over the world. So the best of the best at Baker Hughes are some of the best that you'll find anywhere. And being surrounded by those folks and being challenged to grow and develop and learn new things.
Yeah,
The leadership development program put me in a place to learn about corporate finance and corporate strategy. And so I kind of manufactured my passion as I went along.
yeah, yeah. I understand. Yeah. I kind of had to manufacture my passion as well. I have a criminal justice degree and that I never utilize, but well, maybe in technical writing and reading contracts and agreements, etc.
Great
But
point.
yeah, never really used what I had either. So when you first started in energy, what is something that was more challenging than you had expected?
One of the first things that I noticed as I was launching my career, and again, having the background that I have, having the PhD, I'd steered so deeply through technical disciplines. I was naively under the assumption that, hey, once you develop a better mousetrap, the market is going to clamor for it. It's just clear that it's better, and all the customers will steer toward it. What I've been consistently sort of surprised by as I've gone through my career is the importance of sales and marketing, in addition to just having a better mousetrap, in addition to just the technology. There is an immense amount of storytelling that needs to take place in order to get customers to do things differently than they are used to doing.
Yeah,
Even if you believe deep down there is a much better way available to them, it will cost them less money, it'll create better results. That resistance to change not only exists, inside any specific, human being, but it exists institutionally across the largest companies on the planet.
yeah,
And I would say that it took me a little while to move past that naivete and really understand this is part of it. Yes, developing a better mousetrap is important, and equally, frankly, if not more important, is all the effort that goes into the storytelling and addressing customer fears and concerns and painting a picture that gives them confidence that changing the way they operate will indeed produce better results for them.
yeah. Yeah, I've really enjoyed some of your shares because I feel like you're sharing the story. You're sharing it from a point that I wish I could speak better on, and maybe just sharing you will help others find you and be able to hear your storytelling as well.
Well,
But I
thank you for
think I
saying
think you're
that.
doing a great job, and I appreciate you.
No, I appreciate you saying that. It really does mean a lot to me that what you're talking about is on LinkedIn. I've set up a program now where I'm posting literally every day since last Tuesday, July 5th of 2022. I've made sure to put at least one note up each day, and I try to make almost all those notes data driven.
Yeah,
They're almost all related to energy, and it's again the kind of skills that I've been cultivating as I've gone through the strategic market intelligence work, the corporate strategy stuff. I'm using it to share more broadly, to a wider audience outside of just Pinnacle or our customer base. I'm able to meet some incredible people that way. And what you said about the storytelling, that part is incredibly important to me. It's something that I steer toward when I'm trying to share all the energy related stuff online, because there are very important stories embedded behind news headlines, or frankly lack of news headlines,
yeah,
that are worth sharing. And some of those stories are told privately, right around a water cooler or at lunches or
sure,
after work or over coffees, whatever. And so I've kind of made it my mission to share some of those a bit more publicly.
yeah.
And I never cease to be impressed by the insights and contributions that I'll get back from folks in our industry that have just so incredibly thoughtful. And so it's been a really fun way to supplement what I do in my day job at Pinnacle.
Yeah, perfect, perfect. Now, you may have talked a little bit about this, but what coworkers were the greatest contributors to your character?
That's a fantastic question, in part because I do anchor so much around storytelling, and storytelling involves human beings. Humans just respond to other human beings so much more passionately than they do, inanimate story elements. And so at Baker Hughes, I had two very important. I had a bunch of important mentors, but two that stand out: James Carrasco and Doug Kirkendall helped steer me as I was making these transitions from purely technical role into these more business facing roles. James with the data driven pricing and profitability work, Doug with the strategic market intelligence work. And then I had a mentor at Baker Hughes, like I said, that had gone over to Key and recruited me over there, and that's Sam Edwards. And Sam has given me a lot of perspective. He's seen me across a couple of different stops now, and so he's someone that I have a pretty important relationship as I continue to grow and develop my career, to get his feedback as I go. And I'm at Pinnacle now, and part of the interview process when I joined was with Ryan Sitton, who's the founder and CEO of Pinnacle. And remember, I joined at the end of June of 2020, in the depths of the mobility restrictions from the pandemic, and
Yeah,
not many places were hiring. And Ryan placed an important bet on me, and since I've been at Pinnacle, has given me countless opportunities to work on all sorts of interesting, important activities that generate results for our customers. So I have been very fortunate to cross paths with some really influential people that have done me a lot of favors along the way.
yeah. There's just so many great people in energy that all these other sectors have no idea how much hard work goes into what we all do to provide everyone energy. And it's just we work double time almost, and you know yeah, we have decent pay scale for what we do, but it's just nobody understands how hard that people work in energy, and the players that are the leaders and teaching the younger folks the way, uh, how really amazing these people are. So that's why I like to ask this question, because to showcase these people, because Lord knows I have a couple handfuls of people that were just amazing in molding me to who I am, you know.
That's right, Tim. And to call back to something you said earlier, and I think it's very important. You talked about your field experience, and that's something I've not had since in my path through the energy industry. And it's something that I've always held very close to me. The idea that I've not had it, not in the sense that I necessarily value that, but in the sense that I know that is a gap. That is a set of experiences that I've simply never had. I've made it out to the field a handful of times, to
Sure.
see different things and meet different crews and all the rest, but that is not at all like actually living, eating, breathing, sleeping, working out in the field. And so that field element, right, that part that I've not been involved with, but I have been closely connected with people that have built their whole career in that space. I
Yeah.
think you're right that that's the part that really, to me, drives home energy as a community. But because there are people, frankly, and we know that we're all trying to work to avoid this, there are people that have gone to work and have not come home safely, not come home at all, or not come home safely. And so the stakes are very high. It's incredibly important that we do this work the right way, that we resource it in a way where we can get out of it what needs to be gotten out of it. And I think that just the stakes of it and the blood, sweat, and tears that go into it, particularly on the field side, I think it really does bring the whole industry together. So I say all that in part to almost tell myself or to acknowledge I get to partake in the benefit of that, right? In the fact that this is a close-knit community, because people like you and so many others have worked so hard out in the field, turning wrenches, doing all the hard work when it's, colder than cold and hotter than hot. The weather's rarely cooperating. And so I think it makes the energy space a very different space than many other sectors of the economy.
Yeah. Well, you're doing it justice. You're doing great on sharing what you've been sharing. I'll tell you that much.
Well, thank you.
What is something about your industry that has surprised you in recent years?
That's a great question. I would say in recent years, I have been surprised in a positive way about how creative the energy industry has been, specifically around the use of data, right? Data is a buzzword. It's been a buzzword for so long. It's easy to have your eyes glaze over when you talk about it, when you think about it, or acknowledge it. And I have always been surprised in energy. It seems like there is an enormous amount of good faith effort in understanding how much better can our decisions be if we capture the right data, use it, analyze it in the right way. I've always been impressed because, like I said, it's easy to write off. It's easy to be like, that's consultant speak. I don't want to mess with that. Let's just roll up our sleeves and do the hard work and not think too much about this analytical, data-driven piece. I've always been incredibly impressed because my career has been all built around the analysis of energy as a community being a pretty forward-thinking group and being more receptive to the use of new data sets and new techniques than I might have imagined from the outside looking in.
Yeah. What big projects are coming up on the horizon? What big news is coming up that's on your radar?
So this one I'll talk a little bit about Pinnacle, because it's like I mentioned before, we do industrial reliability services. And while the company got its start around petroleum refining, we're growing into all sorts of spaces. And so we're taking on projects in, say, wood products manufacturing, and we're taking on projects in food and beverage, a couple of different areas within food and beverage. And so what's really interesting is that when it comes to industrial reliability, oil and gas has largely led the way for sort of obvious reasons. It's an old industry. There's a lot of maturity in it. Like I was saying before, the stakes are incredibly high. So there's a lot of incentive to get industrial reliability right. What that means is we could take a lot of these learnings and map them onto different sectors of the economy.
Yeah.
And so it's exciting now to have other complex process facility operators outside of the energy space on the whole start taking industrial reliability very seriously, and us finding out how much of what we've learned in oil and gas maps onto these very different kinds of facilities. So that's the really exciting. If you look very narrowly within industrial reliability, to me, that's the very exciting part right now, is we're broadening our horizons pretty aggressively.
Yeah, that was kind of my model with MarkPoint, was to recruit and staff for our midstream sector, but then we had to shift into downstream. So we just kind of took what we had and brought it into downstream. And then before you know it, we had to shift into telecommunications, because all these security issues, people were laying cable for security. And so it's like just taking all these things I've learned from energy and shifting it into staffing these type of projects. And really oil and gas and it's like I said, these people work so hard that when you go into these other public sectors, we're so used to dealing with all this red tape on everything. When you take it into more of the public sectors, those rules and regulations aren't as hard to me as it is, dealing with, let's say, midstream or downstream, and a little bit easier to manage, I think.
I think that's right. And what you were saying about translating these learnings first out of midstream and then out of oil and gas more broadly. What's interesting, I think, from the outside looking in, it's easy to look at oil and gas and think, that's an archaic dinosaur of an industry, been around forever, and we're trying to transition away from it. What folks don't, I think what they lack understanding wise compared to if they had been inside of it, is just how forward looking the oil and gas sector is, energy is more broadly.
Yeah.
Oil and gas has to be, because it's just, again, the economics are the economic impacts are so incredibly intense that it's worth squeezing every penny you can out of every operation, as long as you can do it in a safe, reliable way. And what that means is oil and gas has been investing in all sorts of cutting edge technologies for a long time that now are finding their way into all sorts of other economic sectors. And again, from the outside looking in, I think it's easy to overlook how much technology, and not just technology in a traditional sense, but how much new management techniques and new approaches originate from inside of oil and gas that are able to be shepherded out into other parts of the economy.
Yeah. And so many trades come together to, let's say, do a pipeline. You've got welding, you've got digging, you've got cross country, you've got, the hydro testing, you got so many specialty things. Then you've got the suppliers, you've got all these different consumables, all these things go into, let's say, laying a line and then servicing it, and building pumps and compressors and all these other things, and
Yeah,
so
all
many
the
trades.
instrumentation that goes into
Yeah,
that.
exactly. So, taking all those and then just focusing on, let's say, cable wire, it kind of makes it a little bit easier. Food and beverage, like you're saying, it's not as much red tape and different things that we have to deal with regulation wise.
That's right.
Um, what is something positive about you outside of work that most familiar with your work wouldn't know?
Well, one thing I think of here, and it's just the time of year is on my mind, is I really enjoy riding bicycles. I'm married and I have two young boys,
Okay.
8 years old, 7 years old. And it is really fun. They're now getting more used to hopping on their bike. We live in a part of Houston where it's easy to get over to some bike trails, and we can
Cool.
ride up and down along the bayous and all the rest. And so it is a great time of year to spend. And now that it's lighter, later, and all the rest, it's a great time of year to spend a lot more time with the boys outside than we're used to in other parts of the year. So I go riding with them, and then for my own personal exercise, I do a lot of riding on my own. I'll ride through downtown and all out to the west part of town, turn around and come all the way back again on these bike trails along the bayous. So it's something I really enjoy doing. It keeps me surprisingly, right. So the physical activity bit is obvious, but for how much thinking I do for my day job and for
Right.
trying to come up with notes to share on LinkedIn, it is nice to have time on the bike. I'm not listening to music. I'm not listening. I'm out there, I guess effectively almost meditating as I'm riding. It is a great way for me to clear my head and come up with new thoughts and ideas. And it's really cool to live in a part of town where all that stuff's pretty easy to have happen.
Very good. Yeah. I've enjoyed bike riding as well, but like you said, when you got your kids and they're so young, it's kind of hard to break free and go really do anything else by yourself until they get a little bit older, I guess. But
that's right.
We're getting there. We're getting everything that we've done. Me and my wife have homeschooled this whole time. So, I've got an
Impressive.
8-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a 4-year-old. But the cool thing is they get to learn all this new AI tech that we play with. They know how to design things and Photoshop and all kinds of stuff. So, they're writing their own little stories and just participating. So it's been a lot of fun.
That's incredible.
Yeah. Yeah. But they're getting older, so we'll be able to do funner things.
That's right. Yeah, it only gets more fun. I'm looking forward to it.
What we got a free chat. We got a few minutes here. Is there any good topic that you'd like to speak on? Anything that the audience could maybe find value in that y'all are working on?
So one of the things that I'm working on, in the side project that I'm working on LinkedIn is studying the energy transition on the whole. And what I've sort of branded my take is, non-obvious data-driven insights, right? That are not. I purposely try to steer away from the inflammatory elements that you see when we try to have conversations around the energy transition. And what I have found, it's very exciting. It's one of the things I talk about inside of Pinnacle a lot. And with any oil and gas community that I meet with, I try to make it clear that no matter where you land on the spectrum of the energy transition, if you imagine, hey, I want to have the quickest transition imaginable. If I could, I would flip a switch and be off of fossil fuels entirely tomorrow. Or if you're on the other side saying, hey, fossil fuels are cheap, reliable, we need to rely on these as long as we can before we make any sort of switch into other energy sources. No matter where you land on this whole spectrum, it is important to all of us that the A+ assets that we have across the oil and gas spectrum today, that we run those as effectively, as efficiently, as safely, as reliably as we possibly can. That will keep energy prices low. It allows us to build this runway because we know even if you want to flip a switch, we know it's impossible to flip a switch and get off of fossil fuels tomorrow. And so we need these assets that can be run, again, most cleanly, efficiently, safely, reliably. We need those to run that way as much as possible. And so in a weird sense, right, when there's a lot of public relations animosity toward oil and gas, it's even more important now than it's ever been to make sure we're investing in these assets, to make sure that we have the best talent available to get as much as we can off of these assets. This is the case in the upstream, and the midstream, downstream sectors. And so I find that to be an important message for me to have internalized, for me to share. This is not a time for anyone inside of oil and gas to be looking down and upset and frustrated and think that our work doesn't matter. In a very bizarre way, and I'll admit it, it's a frankly bizarre way, but in a bizarre way, our work in this sector now matters more than it ever has. If we're going to build this bridge into a new energy future where we know that the energy infrastructure, the landscape will look different than it does today. So I think it's a message that, again, it's important for all of us to internalize, because it's easy to get down, it's easy to get frustrated, it's easy to think that how much future timeline do I have available to me to do interesting work in this space? And for all of us that are doing any kind of work in this space today, I'm convinced you can spend your whole career here and do great work and make incredibly valuable contributions. And when you start studying the data around the energy transition, it becomes very clear what sectors of the economy get electrified very quickly, what sectors of the economy do not get electrified very quickly, where fossil fuels continue to play a role for decades into the future. And so, we don't have enough time to go through all the nitty gritty of that kind of stuff, but that is a message that I spend a lot of time exploring and studying and reflecting on and writing about online. I think it's a message that, like I said, in a bizarre way, is empowering for a lot of folks in oil and gas today.
Yeah, that's one thing I thought, no matter what the sector's looking like, you're always going to need the right kind of candidates. You're always going to need the right kind of talent to go out here. And that's kind of why I focused on that. And, we've got our system up to, like, I'd say 13,000 or so different tradesmen and project managers and salespeople, in our system. So, if anybody needs a hand with recruitment, we've kind of got a little database built up of some good people that are vetted, to help fill any kind of roles that there may be.
That's phenomenal, because there's enormous opportunity out there and a lot of work left to be done. There's a lot of work that translates, across the spectrum of energy. So a lot of work that's done inside of refineries today. There's units being converted over to renewable diesel manufacturing, and we're trying to figure out how much of what we do and know today maps over to that cleanly. And so again, the runway, as far as I can see it, is goes far out ahead of us. And so it's great there's people like you out there trying to make sure that all of these experienced, qualified, high value folks are connected in with opportunities that we know exist widely across the economy.
Now, what is the best way, as we start to wrap up, for the audience to support you, your company, and get in contact with you?
Yes, the easiest way to get in touch with me is through LinkedIn. I'm at Jeff Krimmel, Krimmel. I'm also on Twitter at Jeff Krimmel. And with Pinnacle, you can get in touch directly with me through LinkedIn. You can also follow Pinnacle on LinkedIn. The Pinnacle website is pinnaclereliability.com. It's a great spot. Our marketing team has done a fantastic job putting that site together and really trying to make sure we have informative, accessible content on there to explain what our worldview looks like around industrial reliability and why we approach it in a different way and why that different way is so valuable. So I'd say those channels there are probably the easiest ways to get in touch with me and to follow what Pinnacle's doing.
Yeah, I think it's great information. I think anybody would have a leg up to go check you guys out for sure.
Well, thanks for saying that.
Yes, sir. Now, going forward, if there's anything that I can do to help you out or help you guys get tied in anywhere, don't hesitate to reach out. Okay.
I appreciate that, Tim. And likewise, I'm incredibly easy to get a hold of. So don't be shy.
Thanks for coming. And I can't wait till next time, whenever we can do this again.
Thanks for having me, Tim. It was totally my pleasure.
Yes, sir.
40 people production.